So after a couple of weeks away, F1 was back to the Southern Hemisphere down under in Australia for the first of what I would call the 50-50 races. And if you don't get what I mean by that, well, it's
sometimes maybe good, sometimes maybe shit.
With cars on the reprofiled Albert Park circuit for what is now the second year in a row. And if the race is anything like it was last year, well, it may be our only hope of getting a close championship. As coming into just the third round of the season, it was Max Verstappen at the top of the standings, ahead of his teammate Sergio Perez, with the pair having more points than McLaren, AlphaTauri, Williams, Haas, Alfa Romeo, Alpine, Ferrari, Mercedes and Aston Martin. In fact, as you may have realised, Max and Checo both had more points going than all the other teams. Further down the order, and for a team like McLaren, points were really something they could only dream of. But hey, maybe this was the weekend they'd pull out something special, a pair of mega drives, maybe even finish as high as, 15th? Hey guys, it's Taran and welcome to the On Track channel and to round 3 in Australia. Now before we get going, as always, a quick little reminder that if you do enjoy the video to give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more F1 content. Now with that out of the way, let's get into my honest review of Formula 1 and the 2023 Australian Grand Prix. So what had gone on in the last week? Well, in between races we had the rumours of a Lewis Hamilton Mercedes exit, with the British champion not happy with the car and more importantly its development, along with not getting any younger. One team rumoured was Red Bull, but Christian Horner quickly gave his response,
"Oh, piss off."
Alternatively, Ferrari has always supposedly been a dream of his, and I found footage of what it would be like for him to walk in there on day one. I guess lastly, he could always return to McLaren to try and win a title. Talking of McLaren and in their quest to finish the year with more sponsors than points, they'd added yet another one with Workday.
Not another one?
Those of you that watch Sky F1 will know that Workday is a system for finance, HR and planning. Ironically enough, 3 things that McLaren could really use right now. And finally, because they can't go a single race without making us pull our hair out or roll our eyes, the FIA were causing controversy by deciding to clamp down and threaten penalties for any team pit crews found to be celebrating a win beyond the rules. Well, I say any team, I mean it's really just Red Bull at this point. To be fair though, they do have Jos Verstappen and I'm pretty sure he cancels out any celebration the team may have for a non-Verstappen win. Into FP1 and it wasn't long before we had a car off and into the gravel, with K-Mag locking the rear and having to go off but managing to crawl his way through the gravel trap. So Carlos Sainz, take note, that's how to not get stuck in the gravel in Australia. Over at Mercedes, and it was the quite honestly awesome turn 9-10 chicane causing problems for Hamilton, the car getting loose mid-turn and doing its very best to send itself spinning off. And if you thought it was seemingly only the slow cars struggling, well you'd be wrong, as Verstappen found himself going wide along with having the now regularly occurring gearbox issues. Not going quite as wide though as his teammate Perez, who followed in the footsteps of Kevin Magnussen, locking the rears, going wide and then going through the gravel. Though going through the gravel was taken to a whole new level by Yuki Tsunoda, who made a bigger mess of turn 1 than McLaren have the start of this season. Elsewhere, and of the few cars that weren't in the gravel, they were all on the same bit of track, at the exit of turn 10 looking rather like a flock of F1 sheep all trundling along. However, all this traffic did have a reason, as a lack of GPS meant teams couldn't accurately tell drivers where the other cars were, meaning race control were forced to bring out the red flag. But once we were back out there was time for one last spin, courtesy of Max Verstappen, with the 2-time champ deciding to suddenly become Nikita Mazepin, because YOLO I guess? Into FP2, and after a couple of races in what's probably accurately described as a desert, we got some rain, with everyone on track early to make the most of any dry conditions there were, except Haas, who elected to start their dry running once it already started raining, which was something that Lando Norris also tried, as he skidded wide at turn 1 given he was using the dry tyres in the rain. You'd think he would have learnt by now. Meanwhile, the person in charge of the graphics thought they'd compare Leclerc with Fernando Alonso. Let's just say it didn't go too well for Charles. But given the rain, that was just about it for the action, besides Lance Stroll nearly binning it in the wall while travelling at pretty much a snail's pace. Into FP3, and we started with Kevin Magnussen continuing his quest to explore the runoff at every single corner, this time at the second to last turn, locking up and going skidding across the wet grass, but just slowing down before the wall. Not wanting to miss out on some of the off-roading, and Sergio Perez was getting involved too. Deep at turn 3 just as he was in FP1, and off into the gravel just like in FP1. But he wasn't done there, as after another lock up at turn 3 he also locked up and went deep at turn 13, but it'll be fine so long as he has it figured out before qualifying. Over to AlphaTauri and Nick De Vries, who was fitting his potential new nickname of Nick Debris, given a chunk of his side pod just completely fell off, a bit like Ferrari's pace last season. Someone else who probably should have been leaving debris on track was Zhou Guanyu, or if you're David Croft, Carlos Sainz, with the Chinese driver spinning at turn 2 and being falsely identified as the smooth operator. I mean, come on Crofty, I'm legitimately colourblind and even I knew that wasn't the Ferrari in the wall. Not because of the colour, just Ferraris in the wall or out the session is usually more of a Sunday thing.
Sainz going off onto the gravel.
Oh no, Crofty was right, it is just something that happens all the time. Into qualifying, and Logan Sargent quickly found that putting the power down while on the grass doesn't work, and at the second to last corner he ran wide before sending his Williams into a 180. But at least he kept it going, which was more than could be said for Sergio Perez, who took the fastest car on the grid and stuck it in last place, with the engine issues causing a big lock-up at turn 3, sending him off the track and into the gravel and out of the session.
It was at this moment that he knew. He fucked up.
So while Checo was busy getting a scooter ride back to the garage, everyone else was setting lap after lap after lap, with the track continuing to improve. But not quite enough improvement for Oscar Piastri, as he found himself 4/10 out of going through. Still, did outqualify a Red Bull. Also out was Logan Sargent, which wouldn't be too bad if his teammate Albon wasn't up in 5th. Into Q2, and Lando Norris began the action by taking his McLaren for a trip through the gravel, and then later on in Q2, a trip back to the garage and out the session, joined by both Alpine cars along with both AlphaTauri drivers, and in all honesty, that was about it for Q2. On to the final part of qualifying then, and every car was heading out as early as possible to set lap times, given the news was the rain was coming and it was expected to hit a few minutes from the end of the session. And after the first few runs, the top 6 were close together, separated by just 3/10 with Verstappen in P1 by just 9,000, with the Dutchman electing to extend the gap to half a second on his final run, with Alonso slotting his way into P2, before Russell came up at his Mercedes on the front row, with Hamilton then slotting in between them. And from Russell in 2nd to Leclerc in 7th was just 4/10, setting up a good race for Sunday. On to Sunday then, and it was lights out in Australia for 11 cars plus Perez and Bottas from the pits, though you wouldn't think it for Max Verstappen as he lost the lead to Russell at turn 1, and then lost 2nd place to Hamilton at turn 3 with the Brit deciding to go up the inside. The move obviously immediately accompanied by the "he forced me wide" radio message, and no, it's not just Max complaining because he's Lewis, let's be honest, they all cry like babies whenever somebody else gets past. Either way, being overtaken was a far better fate than what faced Charles Leclerc, as he tried overtaking Lance Stroll, with his reward being getting beached in the gravel. Crofty was right, it is something that happens all the time. This brought out the safety car and gave us a restart with the front 3 pulling away, all within DRS range of each other. In behind, and Alex Albon had made a great start and had his Williams up into the point in 6th place. So Albon wasn't in 6th place anymore. This brought out the safety car for a second time, with the likes of Russell and Sainz electing to gain an advantage by coming into the pits. That advantage swiftly became a disadvantage, as with the gravel on track being like Ferrari's hopes and dreams, and by that I mean a complete mess, it brought out the red flag, which also gave this guy what looks like the absolute best time of his life. Back to the restart, and with Hamilton deciding to back the pack up, it was chaos in behind, with the back of the grid deciding to do their very best to reenact the gravel that spread all over the place. But we did eventually get to start the Australian GP 2.0, with the big winner being Russell, up 2 places instantly. Meanwhile, further back, and Nick De Vries was losing, well, more than 2 places, as he decided to cut across Esteban Ocon, seemingly forgetting that F1 cars don't just disappear from your outside. Talking of overtakes, and we had one up at the front of the field, with Verstappen breezing by Hamilton into turn 9 and taking back the lead of the race. I guess if it was any consolation for Mercedes, Russell was in behind getting past Gasly, making his moves to put his car up into 4th place, having previously fallen victim to the lesser spotted red flag. It's just a shame that that meant nothing. As just a couple laps later, Russell's Mercedes turned itself into a Ferrari and spontaneously died, pulling over at the pit exit and jumping out the car. You know your race has gone badly when the consolation prize for losing out with the red flag is that you likely would have DNF'd anyway. Following a short VSC to clear the semi-barbecued Mercedes, eyes were on Carlos Sainz trying to clear cars, getting past Stroll before making a move past Gasly and putting his Ferrari up into 4th place. Further behind him, and after throwing his weekend away in qualifying, Sergio Perez was making some moves, turn 9 being his location of choice to either get by before the corner or more commonly through it. A move that was later shown to be one absolutely perfected by Esteban Ocon, as he swept past Oscar Piastri with what I'd say is a contender for overtake of the season. Following that, we entered the tyre management phase of the race, with most cars looking to take their hard tyres all the way to the end. And a long stint of course meant lap by lap updates, or should I say complaints, from Hamilton that Alonso behind was quicker and had better tyres. Yep, keep telling yourself that, Lewis. A bit behind, and it appeared that Pierre Gasly in the Alpine had brought himself a new house in Australia, located in Melbourne on the street roughly 1 second behind Carlos Sainz, with the Frenchman keeping himself behind the Spaniard, who was keeping behind Alonso, who was keeping behind Hamilton. A couple of places back and there was some action, with Perez continuing his recovery, passing Norris before also getting past Hülkenberg up the inside of turn 11. Meanwhile, with not much else happening, Max Verstappen, all on his own at the front of the field, decided to take it upon himself to provide some action, going wide at the second to last corner and just managing to hold his car from spinning round, before carrying on his way and deciding to set the fastest lap. So sorry Hamilton fans that got excited with Max off, you can put your party hats away. Lando Norris fans though, you did have something to be excited about, as your boy Lando was up behind Nico Hülkenberg, the German electing to use the commonly frowned upon double move to keep the Brit behind. But that only worked for a couple of laps, as Lando made a nice little switchback to place himself ahead of the Haas car and into 8th place. And with just a few laps to go, it looked like that was that. So up stepped Kevin Magnussen, who decided, while under no pressure from anyone, to just drive into the wall at the exit of turn 2, which meant for the second time in this race, it was a red flag. The stoppage providing the chance for the first annual meeting of the Bad Races in Australia club. But getting back to it, in true Michael Massey style, we'd have racing laps to end. And boy, was it chaos. With Sainz tagging Alonso, Gasly collecting Ocon, Sargent going off with De Vries, and people just generally all over the place. So as I said, chaos. Starting with Alonso being tagged by Carlos Sainz in an exclusively Spanish incident, with the Ferrari staying in P3 but the Aston relegated to the back of the pack. Next up, Ocon tried to get by a slow Gasly, I say tried because they both ended up in the wall, and that was both Alpines out of the race. And all of this meant that nobody really knew what the hell was happening when it came to a result, with the eventual decision to go back to the restart order but finish with a safety car lap. However, a 5-second penalty for Carlos Sainz, and given the safety car, it dropped him all the way down to 12th, meaning that even when they themselves hadn't really done anything wrong, it was still a pointless weekend for Ferrari. But at the front it was Verstappen in P1, Hamilton P2, and Alonso retaining his perfect record of P3 in every race. But anyway, that is all for now. Thank you very much for watching. If you have enjoyed, do give the video a thumbs up and subscribe for more F1 content this season. But until next time, take care.